Hello, and thank you guys for joining us for our second of our Reimagining Diversity in the Workforce webinars. Welcome back to those of you who joined us at November's webinar, and a very special welcome to those of you joining us for the first time. It's so great to see so many of you in the Zoom room today. These webinars are a safe space for learning and conversation, exploring how we can all contribute to a welcoming and inclusive workplaces. In our first webinar, we focused on the who's, the what's, and the how's of working in a diverse workplace. In today's webinar, Tommie will talk about heart, heads, and hands, ways to create welcoming spaces. These webinars are part of our broader Strength and Service series designed to help our member organizations nationwide stay in the know on new and evolving practices and resources. A special thanks to the Evangelical Lutheran Church in America for providing funding for this webinar. Be sure to check out the full offering of the Strength and Service series on our website, and a link is in the chat. Now, Tommie, I turn it over to you.
Thank you, and it's a pleasure to be with everyone. As Alicia said, how we came into the space was energizing, exciting. I don't know about you all, but I thoroughly enjoy music. All types of music. And so it was great for me. And it was actually a great welcoming opportunity to engage me with you once again. I have some slides to share, but as I'm sharing my slides and talking through some of the content today, a gentle reminder, this is not a sit and get. We're going to invite you to use the chat room, and in some cases, use your microphone. So we want to hear your voice, be it in written form or in oral and vocal form. And so that's how we would like to invite you to our conversation today. So let me get into the slide presentation here. We want to revisit the diversity wheel or the identity wheel. Now, for those who are more familiar, even those who are less familiar, this is a graphic of the lens to which we view, and in some cases, experience the world. We look at different dimensions of this wheel, and in some cases, we are very comfortable with our own identity. In other cases, we are less comfortable with either our own identity or the identity of others. And this concept really leads itself to that understanding of how do we create a welcoming, safe, and inclusive workspaces for everyone, and that we're always learning and growing, be it the primary dimension of our gender identity, class, age, or ethnicity, or our secondary dimensions, military experience, religion, appearance, maybe even our parental or family status, and then moving into the organizational and cultural dimensions. Once again, we would like to invite you, if you have any questions, thoughts, or insights, please share those in the chat room. Remember, in our last session, we had the opportunity to ask each and every one of us, amongst these three zones, which do you lie? Which do you fall in? Right now, are you in the comfort zone? Or are you in the learning zone? Or possibly you're in the panic zone? We're going to revisit that again because we had a few questions that people had around this particular content. So we would like to invite you to share any questions that you have in the chat room. We also offered up a survey for you to simply respond to where you feel that you're most comfortable and where you are least comfortable. Here's what the findings said. They said under the personal identity, most comfortable, about 49% of us felt very comfortable with our gender. And then the next two highest levels of comfort was age and sexual orientation. When we looked at the least comfortable, political views, 64%. Least comfortable, a topic or issues that we prefer not to talk about. Some of us avoid them, some of us withdraw from the conversation, and some of us just simply don't go around it at all. No problem. The other four levels of least comfortable were working style, spiritual, religion, and communication style. A couple of things to think about as we are creating welcoming and inclusive work environments. When we observe the most comfortable and least comfortable, we want to call out a couple of things here. The highest, most comfortable categories were, again, gender, age, and sexual orientation. A recommendation here is possibly we want to consider deploying the implicit association test, the IAT. This is a free assessment. It is quantifiable, it's validated. It's from Harvard University, and it will allow us to assess our bias with regards to gender, race, and sexual orientation, and other dimensions of our lived experiences. Again, the IAT. When we take a look at the highest level or highest least comfortable categories, we fell upon political views, working style, spiritual, religion, and communication. Something to consider as a recommendation here, when you look at your own organization, we would like to ask you to continue to communicate the history, the long and robust history of your agency, its mission, its vision, and goals. And what does this do? It may make people feel more comfortable understanding where do they fit in to the bigger picture, not just their job, but where do they fit into the history, the background? Are their own core values connected to the agency's core values? And we'll talk about that a little bit later. When we look at the lowest, most comfortable categories, the lowest categories were national origin, military experience, cognitive style, appearance, language, and geographic location. Once again, with this being said, we would like to consider, or have you consider, taking a look at the implicit association test and understanding our own biases. In other words, there are people within our organization or those interested in joining our organization that hold very true to their personal identity and value their national origin or their cognitive style, the way they think about problems and solutions. Maybe even their appearance speaks a lot about who they are, their language or geographic location. And what we want to do is we want to identify and recognize this uniqueness and care for that individual to ensure that they have that sense of, that feeling of belonging, that they are indeed welcomed, from the new employee orientation to the business updates, to the interactions with our own teams and groups. And then also in some cases, when we have worked with the agency for 30, 40 years and we're looking to retire, that we are giving back that intellectual property, that experience that made me feel comfortable and welcomed, that I will share with others to make them feel comfortable and welcomed and included. The lowest, least comfortable categories were marital and relationship status and parental and family status. And here, there's an excellent tool that we may have referred to last time, but I'm referring to it this time. It is the Intercultural Development Inventory, the IDI. The IDI is a phenomenal tool to allow us to assess both your individual cultural competence and your group's cultural competence. In other words, those who took the assessment within your organization. It will allow us to see if our culture overall, if we're in denial or if we're in polarization, we see difference and we say, you're wrong, I'm right. Or if we're in minimization, that when we see difference, we're exposed with different people and different issues, do we simply focus on what we have in common? Again, there's nothing wrong with that, but we may be highly focused on what we have in common and not be hearing the unique needs and interests of the individual. And or are we moving into acceptance and adaptation? So how do we do this? How do we create ways of developing a welcoming work environment, ways to create welcoming spaces. A very simple approach, but not as simple to implement. And that's where your thought leadership and innovation comes in place. We're going to use the heart, head, and hands. The heart is very important. The heart is really our passion point. It is our emotional buy-in. When organizations create the environment that what they do and where they work can be tied into their emotion and that feeling of belonging, then sometimes when my heart is connected to the work, I don't see the work as work. I see the work as part of my core value, my personal mission or vision. It is something that really motivates me, inspires me. It gets me up in the morning to come into the workplace, be it workplace in my own home or workplace in the brick and mortar. So we want to be able to touch the hearts of our employees. And I'll share with you, and some of you may disagree, but every employee has a heart. All of us do. Some of us say, well, I know someone that's heartless. They too have a heart. We simply need to know what is their passion point, their why. And then once we do that, then we can kind of get that intellectual buy-in by reaching the head. The head is our thinking, our cognitive style, how we actually view the world, be it our workplace, be it our local community, our nation, or the entire globe. How do we see events? And I will share with you that many people can see the exact same event differently. When we're creating a welcoming environment, we're allowing people to assess their own core values and align them with the organization's core values. That is an approach to create that welcoming environment, that inclusive environment. And then lastly, we look at our hands. This is the behavioral effort. Our hands is what we do. So before we had our heart, we are plucking on the heartstrings. It makes sense to us logically, analytically in our head, but now we have to do. That is the behavior. I will offer to you that at times we may misbehave. Give yourself grace and give others grace. But if we are intentional about creating welcoming and inclusive environments, then our hands, our feet, our body begin to do what our head and our heart says is the right thing. Not just from a moral perspective, but from a business perspective, from a service delivery perspective. Again, we would like to invite you to share any comments or questions in the chat room, and I'll field them at any time. Heart, head, and hands. This is a model for creating welcoming spaces in our workplaces. Here's also how to create those. Inclusive workplaces. Acknowledge achievements. Achievements of the organization, achievements of particular departments or divisions or work teams, work groups, and also individuals. We can do this on a weekly, monthly, sometimes a daily basis. It's not a lot of effort to acknowledge job well done. Here is how we're achieving some goals that we had in our strategic plan. Here's a service that was exceptional to a family, to a coworker, to a community member. Encourage collaboration. At any points that you can, encourage the diversity of thought, collaborating and sharing of best practices, of experiences, maybe sharing of solutions. And as people are sharing their solutions, let us listen to others' viewpoints and not to shame them, blame them, but to listen, because we're trying to include them and they may very well be experiencing our environment differently than us. So what we're trying to do is create that inclusive environment by listening to them. And then as they're sharing their viewpoint, their lived experience, we will ask that you respect others' experiences. Last four here, as we look at moving toward that sense of inclusion, to care about the individual. We're not machines. We're not numbers. We're not widgets. We are people. We're human beings. We're individuals who are flawed and imperfect. And sometimes we come to work and we have our best days. And other times we don't have as good of days. And so our staff, our family members, our community members who come in, volunteers, business partners, let's care for them as an individual, as a person that has a heart, has their own mind, and they have their own abilities. And then we continue to develop that comfortable workspace, to working from that comfort zone to learning zone, maybe encroaching on the panic zone and finding that comfort zone wherever they are comfortable. And then lastly, the last two, let us express gratitude. Express gratitude, the attitude of gratitude that begins with you, your personal heart mission, expressing gratitude. And sometimes you want to say a quick good morning or good evening. Maybe we want to introduce people or greet people with a smile. How about that? And no longer greeting people with the frown or how can I help you? And then they tell you, okay, I need to direct you over there. Wow, that was transactional. I don't feel like I'm welcome. I feel a little bit ashamed. But when we have that attitude of gratitude, it elevates the energy. And with that being said, we want to stay positive. Many times in my closing signature on my emails, I have a statement and it goes like this. It's just two words, always positive. I used to receive feedback like, Tommie, are you always positive? I said, well, I try to be. I try to communicate this to whomever I'm talking to within their own environments to stay positive. And in my case, I have to always be positive. A couple of things as we move to our break.
Hey, Tommie.
Yes. Yeah.
Hi, sorry, it's Susan. Just before we move on, if you could go back to your last slide for a moment. When you talk about acknowledging achievements and encouraging, I think you gave some good examples of that, but what about listening to others' viewpoints and respecting others' experiences, particularly when they're different from your own viewpoint and what you may hold as a value? What tips do you have for us to really increase that listening and respect for others, particularly when it's in conflict with what we may believe?
Excellent question. Thank you for pausing me. This is no problem. This is what I enjoy, actually. I would like to offer up three things. One, be humble. As you're listening to others' viewpoints, be humble. Don't listen to share your feedback, right? So don't listen to someone and say, okay, I understand what you're saying. I've had this experience or not, but I can't wait to share with you what I think. When we're humble, that means that I know what I know. I've experienced what I experienced. I feel what I feel. But what do you know? I become curious. And so through that cultural humility, I begin to make a connection with the other person's heart, head, or their hands. The second thing I would like to recommend is that as we're listening to others' viewpoints, we may intentionally or unintentionally become uncomfortable. And we may not even know we're uncomfortable, but I may get a little flush in the face, or the hair on the back of my neck stands up, or I may feel that chill or even that warm sensation coming through my body and energy. This is telling me something, that I am feeling something. Although I'm listening to the other person's viewpoint and I'm sitting there or standing there looking like I'm listening, maybe some nonverbal affirmations, a head nod, maybe verbal affirmations such as, I understand what you're saying. Yes, I understand. But my body is telling me, ooh, this is different. This is very different. It may move into polarization. Oh, this idea is not going to work. Or that's not true. They wouldn't have experienced that. Or that other person that they're talking about, that's not the way they are. Again, we're saying cultural humility and listening to the other person, not passing judgment. Maybe listen to the whole experience, the whole story as they are telling it. And then thirdly, to understand by way of respecting others' experiences, that their experience is indeed their experience as they know it. I would ask that when you suspend judgment, you don't throw yourself in that experience to pass judgment on the other person's experience, because it's different. Hey, we work for the same company. We basically have the same experiences. Ouch. That's not true. So those 3 steps can help us better listen to other people's viewpoints, remain humble ourselves, and then respect that other person or other people's experiences so we can know and understand and learn more.
So we have, those are great examples. We have another question in the chat about maybe just going a layer deeper on that, being humble and the humility in the workplace. I think it can be a little hard to envision what that looks like. Is it really just staying silent and nodding your head and saying, I'm listening to you? Or what does it look like? How do you demonstrate that humility?
Again, another great question. First and foremost, and this is coming from me, unless you have all the answers to life, you should be humble. I don't know a single person that's perfect. So humility means that you too can learn something new regardless of your season or your age. You can be 89 years old, 99 years old. You can learn something new unless you have all the answers to everything. Personally, I don't know anyone like that, and I am definitely not that person that knows everything. So what does humility look like? It looks like empathy. It looks like treating the other person in the way that they would like to be treated. It looks like active listening, and it sounds like active listening. What do I mean by that? Looking like active listening is when that person comes into your office, your workspace, and you're busy writing a email, maybe following up on a text, and they need your attention, that you may offer to them, if you can, just give me 30 more seconds, 1 more minute. I need to wrap up this email, and then I'll be with you. They accept. 1 minute passes. You turn to them and you give them your undivided, undistracted attention. That's humility. It's not about you. It's about the other person. Another form of humility is when you've made that mistake, that misstep, that error, own it. Be accountable and be responsible for it. And it is okay to sincerely apologize. When you are truly sorry, apologetic, say it. I'm sorry, I didn't mean for that to happen. Because for the most part, our organizations do not intend to hurt people, be it physically, emotionally, psychologically. That's not our intent. But I'll share with you that people get hurt. There are things that are said, there are things that are done in our organizations that people get hurt. And as leaders, as employees, as organizations, sometimes we have to say, I'm sorry, my bad. It wasn't my intent. That is how humility behaves. And then we follow up to say, or do, what can I do to improve or help or mend or heal? This is how we create inclusive workplaces. Thank you for that pause. This is excellent clarification. Let's keep going. A few steps, and you can capture this. You'll get the, per your request, you'll get the slides later. Create a culture of respect. Respect is paramount in making employees feel welcome and happy. that you create policies that are against forms of disrespect, harassment, discrimination, and gossip from or amongst your employees. Create a culture of safety or security is safety. Here's a book that I highly recommend. It's Tim Clark's book, The 4 Stages of Psychological Safety, Defining the Path to Inclusion and Innovation. Phenomenal book. The 4 Steps of Psychological Safety. The Harvard Business Review, Forbes magazine, and other periodicals and research organizations are saying that psychological safety is now becoming the #1 concern of employees. We want to feel psychologically safe. Creating that security or safety is part of that safety. We want to create that culture of excitement. And like we came into today's session with a little vibe, a little music, we would like to offer that for all of you. There are different things that we can do to generate excitement and engagement, right? The last 2, before I answer any questions or thoughts, as we continue to create a culture of integrity, I'm going to invite you all to be genuine, honest, be kind. How about that new 4-letter word? Be kind. Maybe upfront, direct, and accessible. It is okay to say what you're going to do and do what you said you will do. It's okay. In fact, that's part of integrity. And also expect the same of other people. Expect integrity in other people. You can set the expectations and then meet, if not exceed, those expectations. And then lastly, as we're creating that environment of welcome and environment of inclusion, create a culture of communication. Continue to inform employees of changes and updates and acknowledgements, because ambiguity and uncertainty may create anxiety in employees. When I don't know what's next, the next change, the next whatever, I get tense, I get anxious. And so therefore, I may feel that I'm not included because this change that's happening is simply landing on me. I have no control. I've lost control of the direction. I lost my own identity, if you will. I've lost the feeling of belonging. Change basically means that there's some loss as well as some gain. People react to change because they lose something, but oftentimes can't see what they can gain through the change. When we have a welcoming and inclusive environment, although we may be changing, it's not all a loss. Sometimes it's, okay, what can we do differently and what can we do better? And that's how we can customize our communications to our different employees to get them to be included in the way that they want to be included, right? I'll pause here for any questions coming out of the chat room.
We're looking pretty good right now, Tommie, but someone, oh, sorry, I think one just came in. How can staff express hurt or disagreement if it concerns a leader or colleague without damaging the relationship, such as expressing an employee's treatment or poor performance and it not be gossip? Indeed.
Another great question. There are a couple of ways I would suggest. One, that you speak from maybe your perspective, not naming the other employee, not naming the other situation, but or circumstance, but really speak about the concern from your perspective. You may have direct experience with that discomfort and trying to share with the leader, but you can speak from your perspective on behalf of the other people. And let me clarify that. I'll give you a lived experience. So as a former chief diversity officer, I was responsible for all things DE&I with this multinational company. 75,000 employees in 82 countries. We had particular employees in certain countries that were very task oriented. They didn't want to do anything with the people stuff, just wanted to execute the tasks. And when a task wasn't done, leadership, particularly in the US, would ask the leadership in that particular country, what's the problem and who was at fault? And in that country, they would not throw any one individual under the bus. So the response was, we'll fix it, sir or ma'am, we'll fix it, right? Oh, okay, I understand you'll fix it. That's my expectation for the problem to be fixed. But who was the problem? Who created it? I'll take ownership, right? That's how this person was giving feedback to their superior, right? I'll take ownership. I'm responsible for the team. So the problem, started with me ultimately. So no, the problem didn't start with you. Who was it? So it was a tug of war around the cultural difference. The cultural difference was in the US for this particular situation, we wanted to find out who the person was that made the mistake. On the other side, it was a mistake was made. We own the mistake. We will fix it. I versus we. So when giving feedback to a leader, you have to think about, is this a situation that could help the we, the entire organization, or is this a situation that could help the I, the individual person? In often cases, it's the we. Anything that happens within any individual, any group of people, if it's done well, if it's resolved well, it can help the entire organization. So my approach and process will be to speak from the process or from the viewpoint of this will help all involved, the we. The second and last piece is to bring things up to your leaders with regard to maybe another situation or another employee, another site or location. It may be an opportunity just to learn more about that event, to learn more about the why it happened, and to understand how the leader would best receive the feedback. Best receive it such they are listening to the experience versus judging the experience or even avoiding or minimizing the experience. So part of this is learning the leader. How would the leader like to receive the information? If it's a one-off situation, it may not be heard. That leader may be responsible for a number of people. But if it's something that the leader can kind of resonate with their heart, right? Their heart, it may move mountains.
I think we're striking a chord with this, Tommie, but I hesitate. I know we wanted to go into some breakout times but let me just quickly, before we go to our breakouts, I want to call out Sandra's great comments about these elements of a culture.
Yep.
Said that they're working on it in their organization, and they're calling it creating a space of grace. I thought that was a nice phrase. And then, there are still more questions, and maybe after they can continue in the breakout, or we can pick it up after the breakout. But, sometimes when the situation is, it's a needed behavior change that takes time, but then people are getting frustrated, and it's hard to allow that time to take place for the change to take place. So maybe after the breakout, we can come back to that question. But really, really great dialogue going on in the chat, and I think some of these conversations could continue in the breakout.
Yeah, that's absolutely. Let's continue these and other topics of conversation. And so for the breakout session, we'll spend maybe 7 or 8 minutes. We want you all to share using your microphone. We want you to share what your organization's core values are. These are the things that are on the website, on the walls in your brick and mortar buildings, et cetera. What are your core values? And how might these core values connect or align with other individual values? We're going to our breakout session. We'll come back, have a quick debrief, and continue to field the questions that you might have. All right. See you back in a few. We're returning back. We're returning back to the main room. Thank you all for breaking off into your breakout rooms, sharing your experiences, your organizational values, and how we might align the organizational values to our individuals and vice versa. We want to take a few moments for you all to use your microphone to share back, because unfortunately, all of us were not in the same breakout group. So we didn't hear what each and every group said. So do we have a volunteer that may give a quick summary of what you heard? This is an open invitation.
Mhm.
Right.
I could share. In my group, there was quite a few that shared what their missions were and what their values were of their companies. And it was very interesting that some, while sharing their mission statement, kind of came to the revelation that, oh, it was too long. It needed to be more dialed in. But that, you know, they could work on that in the future. And I thought that was really interesting.
Yeah, thank you for sharing. Indeed, indeed. Other thoughts?
I can
Hey,
jump
Sandra,
in and
did you
kind
have your hand raised?
of, oh, sorry.
I'm sorry, Jen. How about Sandra, and then we'll go to Jen.
Yeah, I did. I tend to be the person to speak up, so I was trying not to, but it's okay. I was creating a space of grace for other people to talk. It's okay. It's all good. Maurice was actually, I'm pointing because he's right below me on my screen, but Maurice was actually in our group, and he talked about the 16. Well, how did you refer to it, Maurice?
Oh, it's a 16 personality trait.
The
It's really
16
understanding everyone's personalities.
Yeah, and how that was a big part. He said he's a talker. I don't know what that means. No, I do. But yeah, but that he was a talker, and people don't always like that. And sometimes you have to take a step back, and you have to realize that you give other people a voice, and how hard that is. And then we talked about the importance of your point, Tommie, of communication and how it can help alleviate fear and anxiety among employees, and how much we learned about that over the past 3 years, as we all were going through everything that we were going through over the past 3 years. So that's what we shared.
Yeah, Sandra, thank you very much. Thank you. Jen?
Oh, I was just going to echo that. I noticed when looking at our values that our mission is really succinct, but when we jump into our values, I think that we're one of those organizations that could drill down a little bit more, just so that we can have it, frequently posted in more locations, so that, if you ask an employee of ours what our values are, that they can, that they know, and that, they work with those values on a daily basis when serving the people that we serve. A lot of people had really succinct values, and just had them displayed in a lot more places than we do. And I think that that's something that we could improve on as well.
This is excellent. Let's take one more before we continue, because I'm enjoying hearing some tools like the 16 personalities, or a deeper dive into our mission or values, such that it becomes part of our employees and our own DNA. We see ourselves within the organization and what it stands for from a value proposition. Let's take one more.
Hi, can I speak?
Sure can. Thank you, ma'am.
Hi, I'm May, and I'm with Lutheran Social Services. And I was sharing with, hi, this is Tyler. He crashed our meeting.
Hey, Tyler.
And what I shared with the team was our mission statement. And then I shared that within the last 2-3 years, as an agency, we actually had open discussion and actually created our values. And so I shared like 3 out of the 9 about curiosity, and intentionality and diversity. And not only did we made bookmarkers, we also have like posters that we put around in our offices. And we also review these with our new employees at onboarding. So to keep it ongoing, and periodically we do discuss how we apply these values during our daily work lives. So that's why I just wanted to share.
This again is fantastic. When I heard that, I was listening to our true north. So we have the bookmarks, we have posters, etc. But this is our why. We are aligned with our values. And we want to attract and recruit individuals who are aligned with the values so they can contribute, have that sense of belonging, that sense of welcome, that sense of inclusion. And we want to live up to our mission. That's our goal. And as May mentioned, every now and again, we may need to be reminded. Some of us get into the rigor of our daily operation. We need to be reminded every so often that, hey, here's why we do what we do. All right. Again, thank you for sharing your experiences in the breakout rooms. I do want to take just a few moments to offer up some of my own lived experience and what I've learned, that what works with regards to creating a welcome and inclusive space and workplace, and then some things that they have not worked as well. I'll give you a quick example. Once again, I'm Chief Diversity Officer for a large organization, and my job is to ensure that most, if not all people, have that sense of belonging, that they are included, they are respected and valued for who they are and what they do. That was my job, to cascade it throughout the organization, that people run our organization, not machines, not tables, chairs, and computers, but people, living people. And how can we maximize the potential of our people? And so one time I had the opportunity to give some feedback or an update to my boss, my manager. And he was very high up in the organization. And I wanted to be crystal clear and prepared to meet with him. Basically, he needed to know where we were from a company perspective on our people. And we had this system called PeopleSoft. It's how we understood and calibrated our people. Who's, where, when, what, all that good stuff. And so the people in our organization, unfortunately, because it's such a large organization, it changed weekly and monthly. That we would have sometimes 100 people retire throughout the world, easily 100 people, or people transition, get new jobs, people come on board. So I wanted to provide him the best updated, accurate data. So I had the moment to go into his office, which was at a nice office. They had water with cucumbers in it. I loved that, and had $1 million photos on the wall, images and portraits. And I go into his office, he shuts the door, and he has a particular look on his face, a look of concern. And so I'm sitting there on the edge of my seat. I have my legal pad and my pen, and I have my report. And he says, Tommie, I wish that you had provided the report a little bit sooner than you had. I said, I do appreciate that. I did want to give you the most accurate data because it's changing daily, and I wanted to be accurate. He says, I understand that. Thank you. Thank you. He says, but can I give you some feedback? I said, sure. And he begins to give me some critical feedback around my performance. Much of it I already knew. We were making adjustments, something that he had already shared with me before. And then he said, I don't know what type of family you come from, but where I'm from, and he continued to have this conversation for another 15 minutes. I'll share with you right now that I do not know what he said in those 15 minutes. I was literally focused on, I don't know what type of family you come from. I thought that it was inappropriate. I'm working, we're working. What does my family have to do with this conversation? Although my family is part of my core value. I love my family. It's why I do what I do, is to be able to support my family. But I was confused about, I don't know what type of family you come from, et cetera, et cetera. From that moment, for 2 full years, I felt like I do not belong here. I had better experiences later on with other people, but this one event with this one person really, I'll be frank, it rubbed me the wrong way. I was in an organization that had 75,000 employees, and I did not feel welcomed. I did not feel like I belonged. I was lonely in a crowd. Now, some of us may have experienced that sometime, not only at work, but we can go out into social environments where we may be the one and only or the one of few. We can be in the crowd, but feel alone and unwelcomed. And so some of the things that organizations do well with regards to this is that they are intentional about making people feel welcomed. They take asserted effort in their website communications, in their written email communications, and their verbal communications. The people that represent the organization, they represent the principles of that organization. They elevate it. We're easy to work with. We want you to join the company, right? We need you. And every time you have a touch point, from the administrative assistant to the receptionist to the custodial team, everyone seems to want me here. This is what organizations do well. It is a common theme that you are welcome, you belong, and we need you. So when the employees go through the week to week, the day to day rigmarole and don't feel their best, there's someone else unexpectedly that says, in one way, shape, or form, we want you, you're welcome, we need you. Simply the energy and the spirit of a company can be welcoming. This is what organizations do well. They literally bottle it. And everyone's drinking the Kool-Aid, right? Where do companies and organizations make the mistake?
And Tommie, I think a really interesting follow-up question to that is, like you said, we're all going to make mistakes. We don't intend, our intent is not always the same as what happens. So how do you create a space for staff? I'm just looking at the questions coming in through the chat. So when mistakes happen and hurt happens, how do you create a space for that hurt to be expressed in a non-threatening way, in a very safe way? And then a follow-up from that is, like, how do you move from aspirational core values into daily reality? So I think unfortunately, we're going to run out of time again. We could talk for another hour, but if you could reflect on those two questions, that would be great.
Sure can. With regards to that follow-up, one, again, I said apologize. Sometimes we have to apologize, take some ownership, accountability. And then secondly, we may want to think about how we individually, how we build trust and possibly how we regain trust. Oftentimes when there's a mistake or misstep, trust has eroded, or in some cases, it's been lost. So to engage with that person or that group around that loss of trust, the loss of how things used to be, we have to understand ourselves. How do we build trust? If it's through communication, what type of communication? If it's through time over time, how much time does it take for us to build trust? It can be a number of different factors of building trust. And then there's another approach of how do you regain trust once it's been lost? I would strongly ask each and every one of us, when we ask ourselves the question, when trust has been lost, when someone has lost your trust, how do they regain it? If you, in your heart of hearts, in your mind of mind, say, they can't regain my trust, that's why I want to ask you to pause. If you believe that no one can make a mistake and lose your trust, and you're saying they cannot regain your trust, this may be an opportunity for recalibration. And what do I mean by that? That means that if you cannot give an opportunity for a person or people to regain the trust that they lost in you, then if they do something or you do something that has lost trust, do you expect them to regain their trust with them, or they take your trust? The short answer is around trust. And in trust, it may take some time. And that regaining of trust may not be on your timeline. That's where grace and empathy come in. In closing, I apologize. Let me hear from you, your experiences. Let me offer up what I believe I can do, or you can tell me what you think I should do. And then let's work together along this journey that is not in forever, but let's work together toward reconciliation, reconciling this environment of being welcomed or welcoming and inclusive. There's not a one size fits all with regards to some of these questions. The questions are very, very valid. I would share first looking yourself, and then have empathy and look at the other person or people and their why. And that will move us toward that place of now we're moving toward welcoming and inclusive workspaces.
Thank you, Tommie. I think there were some other really great things going on in the chat that I just want to quickly pull out. I think I saw a really good question about how do you manage that tension between folks who are ready to move on and are getting frustrated with those who aren't able to move on, and those that need more time for behavioral change. I think that's a really interesting thing that we can follow up on in the future. And also, just how do you go from the aspirational to reality? You gave some really good tips today, but I think we could continue that conversation. And luckily for us, we have the chance to have Tommie with us one more time in February 7th. We have one more webinar. And the idea behind that webinar has been, really thinking about the retention process, but really thinking about the retention process. So what does that look like in recruitment? And how do you then onboard people? And how do you really create this culture where people want to stay? So Tommie and I will take some notes. I think some of these questions that are in the chat would be a really great part of the next webinar as well. So I hope you all come back for that webinar. Obviously, we thank all of you for joining us today and for making this time so rich in the dialogue. And we thank Tommie for sharing his talents, his knowledge, his lived experience with us. I've mentioned that we have our final webinar with Tommie in February. I hope you register for that if you haven't done so already. It's not too late to register for the CEO Summit. We would love to see you there. And I know we're going to have even more rich dialogue around challenging topics when we can be together face to face. And that is in January at the Wigwam in Arizona. So again, thank you, Tommie, for your time today. And thank you to all of you who stayed with us, who participated. And we look forward to seeing you again in February.